All right, we are back, and we're going to talk about ways to kind of steal or acquire passwords that don't involve having to acquire the password hash and then crack that hash somehow. Okay, so there are lots and lots and lots of ways to do this. I'm just going to discuss a few. Now, these are kind of the technical way to do it, the ways to do it that involve having computers, having some kind of specialized program or specialized knowledge. And again, this is not a complete list, but some of the common methods are things like packet sniffing. And this is where basically an interloper can listen in on network communications. So if I go to a local coffee shop and connect to their Wi-Fi and then start sending signals back and forth over that Wi-Fi network, other people on the network can kind of listen in on the messages I'm sending between my laptop and the wireless router that the coffee shop is using for me to connect to. So that Wi-Fi signal can be intercepted by somebody else within range, with the appropriate equipment and software. And if I start sending a password over that connection, if I log into my bank account or whatever, if that discussion, if that conversation between me and the router isn't encrypted, anybody who listens can just capture my password out of thin air. If it is encrypted, it makes it more difficult, but still not impossible for somebody to kind of capture it between point A and point B, in this example, my laptop and the router. You can also do packet sniffing in other ways involving, over the internet. You don't have to physically be next to the same Wi-Fi signal. But basically, packet sniffing involves listening to the communications from one person to another and then trying to pick out information that is useful. Again, in this example, a password, right? Password recovery software. So there's lots of software that people have designed to recover forgotten passwords. We've all forgotten passwords before, right? Well, there's software developed that will help you figure out what that password was. The bad news is bad guys can use that too. If they can sneak password recovery software onto your device, either because they have physical access to it, or they've used a Trojan or some other kind of method to get password recovery software onto your device, they can then use that software to recover your forgotten passwords. So this is why both physical security and things like malware security are so important for not just the immediately obvious issues, but also because of things like password stealing, credit card number stealing, PII stealing, etc., etc. And then, of course, there's keystroke loggers, right? We discussed this a little bit in an earlier section, but keystroke loggers are just a piece of malware that records every single button that is pressed on a certain device and then sends that list to some bad actor, right? And what that means is, at some point, while my keystrokes are being logged, I'm going to type in my password. And then as soon as that information gets sent to the bad guy and he looks through all those keystrokes that I made, they're going to be able to pick out my passwords from that list, right? From that giant log of everything I've typed. And keystroke loggers, again, like password recovery software, can be put in via physical access, via some kind of Trojan. There's lots of different ways that people can sneak this kind of software onto your device. But in all these cases, there is some kind of technological means by which people can steal your password. Now, there are also non-technological means to gather people's passwords, right? So once again, we're going to talk a little bit about social engineering. And social engineering, again, as we've discussed in a previous section, is kind of the art of essentially being a con man or con artist and convincing people you are allowed to be where you're at, doing what you're doing, asking for the information you're asking for, etc., etc. So, one of the ways that is disturbingly successful is just asking, right? So if I dress up in the IT uniform for a certain company and then walk into that company and say, "Hi, I'm Bob from IT. We're having a problem with the system. Can you write down your username and password on this piece of paper for me?" You would be amazed and disturbed at how many people would just be like, "Oh, yeah, sure," and write down their usernames and passwords. Just asking people for their password works a remarkable amount of the time, and it will work more and more often the more you can convince them that you are somebody who has a right to know, i.e., the vice president of their company, or somebody working for tech support for whatever company, or their spouse or whatever. If you can convince them that you're somebody else that should have access to this information, you can just ask them, and you'll get receive their password straight from them a disturbing amount of time. Another process we can use is just guessing, right? Once again, people don't pick passwords randomly the vast majority of the time. So if we know someone, we might be able to just guess their password. And there was an instance when I was young where I was over at a friend's house having a sleepover. I was probably 14 or so. And we stayed up late, and I was hanging out with my friend, and their parents had a really nice satellite television system with all the channels. But the channels that we wanted to watch, HBO or Cinemax or something, were password protected because they didn't want the children of the house watching these, adult movies like, what appears on HBO and Cinemax and those other paid channels. I'm discussing rated R movies here, not rated X. So I took the remote and tried to go to one of those channels, and it asked for a password, and my friend said, "Yeah, I told you it was password protected." I said, "Hey, what's your birthday?" And he told me, and I input that, and it didn't work. So I said, "What's your brother's birthday?" And he told me, and I input that, and bing, it worked. Just because I knew that people with children frequently use their children's birthdays as passwords, I was able to guess the correct password for this movie service, and we were able to stay up late watching, rated R movies. Phishing, which we've discussed in previous sections. Again, this is kind of similar to the asking part, but usually email or some other web-based messaging app. You can send people a message saying, "Hey, there's a problem with your account at such and such bank. Please click here in order to input your username and password." And then they click there, and it goes to what looks like the website that is supposed to be asking them for their password. But it's really run by a bad actor. They input their username and password, and now that username and password gets sent to the bad actor. And now we don't need a hash in order to break into your bank account or your Facebook account or whatever we've phished from you, right? Tailgating. Once again, we discussed in an earlier episode, but this is a way to bypass physical security, which again, physical security and, computer passwords are essentially the same thing, just one guards from the physical and one guards from the technological. And then, of course, dumpster diving. There are a disturbing number of people who, A, write down their passwords, which is dumb in and of itself, never write down a password, but then B, throw that piece of paper out, right? So just looking through people's trash can get you a huge amount of information, including people's passwords. Now, maybe your organization forces you to get a new password every 60 days, but you write down each one, and then when it's no longer useful, you throw it out. Well, if it's no longer useful, it's no longer your password. What do you care if people dig through your trash and find this old password? Well, again, a lot of people, especially when organizations require rotating passwords, which is a terrible, terrible idea. But if an organization requires rotating passwords, people will often have kind of a logical series of password progressions, right? So maybe the first 60 days, our password is pencil123. But then we're forced to change it, so we change it to pencil234. Then we're forced to change it again, so we change it to pencil345, right? So in that way, even knowing old passwords can help us figure out new passwords, right? Okay, we're going to take another break. Thank you so much for watching.